We have a real problem. Towns being incinerated by wildfires we cannot stop.
I had to walk away from everything that we have ever known.
The idea that we can fireproof this landscape.
That's impossible.
So I'm glad we got out with our lives.
The research tells us we're going in the wrong direction.
We could eliminate communities being destroyed.
And we don't have to live in a concrete ammo bunker.
Welcome to the All Things Wildfire Podcast, where we delve into the latest trends and hot topics in protecting properties against wildfire. So sit back, relax, and join us as we arm you against disaster.
Now, Ralph, it kind of brings me back to the home ignition zone. And what you had said earlier about what Jack Cohen said about what happens 100 feet away from us is irrelevant. And it's interesting because you used a term earlier. Let's see here. It's the arrangement of materials. I like that. It's the arrangement of the materials that we have in our home, whether it's vegetation or whether it's patio furniture or whether it's the welcome mat at our front door. Whatever those things are that could potentially ignite around us is really what brings the vulnerability to us. And, one of the things that we like to share is, for homeowners is, like a simple analogy is imagine yourself walking around the perimeter of your home within the first 5 feet and just lighting matches. Imagine you're just lighting matches all around you as you're walking. Will something ignite? And if that something will ignite, then you have to realize that's something we've got to pull away from the home so we don't pull the fire to us because of these embers that are flying for miles that are going to ignite any vegetation. Is there any way that you like to explain it to homeowners as to some of the basic fundamental things they can do to prepare their homes?
Yeah, there's so many wonderful and eye-opening anecdotes that have been shared from folks, that were firefighters that were in the fires, or from spending time with Jack Cohen recently in Missoula. I mean, he's the one who said, look, it's the design or arrangement of materials that's primary, not the selection of them. Because a lot of folks say, I've got a composition roof. Do I need to get a metal roof? I want to go get a metal roof. And should I change out all my siding? And they go right to these, these big ticket items. Well, look, if you got a wooden roof, yeah, you need to do something about that.
Right.
But I think 98% of the roofs in California are already Class A roofs.
Right.
Yes, if you have a valley on that roof with some fine material that it can ignite, take care of the fine material so it won't ignite. If you can remove your gutters, that could be an expensive project, and do a drip line, French drain so you never have to deal with gutters. That's great, do that. But really, I think it's that design or that arrangement is so important. And that's why, we need folks like your company working with landscape architects. And, this needs to be part of the curriculum starting in landscape architecture school to really, really see where those ignition points are. And there's two pieces. One is what is currently around your house that is a pathway for the physics of fire, right? What will ignite and then ignite a larger piece of material? Like your 6x6 holding up your deck is not going to ignite from an ember. It's going to ignite from something smoldering and burning adjacent to it.
Yes.
And then igniting it. And the other piece is in a wind-driven firestorm, as you said, embers are coming from somewhere else. And they're inevitably going to come from somewhere else. Grassland, shrubland, forest, doesn't matter, right? It will come, or a neighbor's home.
Yes.
And it's how those will gather. So you also have to look at, if you have a connected fence that's vertical.
Yes.
We have extensive footage from Paradise of some folks who stayed behind, and they had garden hoses, and they defended their homes, and they went back inside, and I'm not necessarily recommending that people do this, but they gave us footage, heartbreaking footage of their neighbors' houses where their hoses weren't long enough for them to hose down their neighbors' fences. and there was a house igniting. It burned, it ignited the fence wicked to the next house, it ignited the next house, and so forth. And it just was like dominoes, right? The other story I share is that in many cases in the Santiam Canyon, what ignited the houses occurred after the flame front moved through. After. Yeah. So you have embers ahead, maybe getting into your crawl space or your attic, igniting your structure. The flame front typically moves through, particularly in a wind-driven fire, just in a couple minutes, right? And it's the radiant heat from that is not what ignites houses. That's like less than 10%, right? But if you have bark mulch smoldering and burning afterwards for days, and so much is going on that the firefighters can't be everywhere all at once, you can still lose your house. So the firefighters in Gates, Oregon, which is in the Santiam Canyon, they told us that for like 8 to 10 days, they drove around and put water on bark mulch, filled up their tender and put water on bark mulch, filled up their tender and put water on siding or a garage that was being ignited by smoldering and burning bark mulch. I mean, I know why people love bark mulch. My wife uses it and we use it to keep the moisture in the soil around plants, and it's decorative, but we have since removed it and replaced it with rock, and there's other alternatives. So, I think there's a lot of those kinds of things. And this is what Roy Wright, who's in the film from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, it's like, we need to move our shrubbery away. We need to think about those things. And yes, we do need to do the vents, which you all do. And we do need to consider, how we prepare our gutters to be easier to maintain so that they're, super clean if and when fire comes. And, we need to figure out how we reconfigure our fencing so that it's not flammable right adjacent to the house, or detach it. And that's just a lot of reimagining. But a lot of that stuff, 0 to 5 feet or 5 to 30. I mean, of course, there's studies about the one that I found so interesting was at the Wildfire Resistant Homes Conference, which you all were a part of, which was like how junipers or cypress torch.
Yeah.
And they generate so much heat, they can crack a window if the flames are bent over by wind, because they have so much fine material up in that cypress or that juniper that it just does a pulse of like 800 to 1,000 degrees. And that if you don't have a tempered window, boom, your window will shatter from that pulse of heat, and then embers can get inside. So I think, those things are just super neat to sort of understand all the experiments that have done, but then also like it allows you to go, okay, this is at the top of the list, this is second, this is third, I can get to it, I have a prioritized list.
Right.
And, there's maybe for most homes, it's $10,000 or less. I mean, I think people are working on these analyses of what and for some folks, 10,000, for many folks, 10,000 is a lot of money, but some of those things they can take on themselves. And anyway, I just love to share all the different anecdotes, that it's doable, that it's that small stuff that matters in relationships, and that's that small stuff that matters in relation to your house.
Yeah.
That you can figure out.
I love that statement. Because I think that rings true for everyone on an individual basis, as far as it's the small things in relationships, and it really does become the small things that we can do to help ourselves prevent this damage. I do want to touch on a couple of things that you said. The landscape architects, Ralph, we've done some walkthroughs with some estate managers and these architects, and they have so much pride in the work that they've done to put these Italian cypress trees right up against the house or a few feet away for privacy. And when Rich Snyder, our former firefighter, fire marshal, fire captain, we go out there to do an assessment, he'll say, hey, look, can we consider, taking off, the cypress? This is the vulnerability. And this one landscape architect reacted and said, no way, we're not touching it, we're not moving it. And, if we got to spray fire retardant on it, that's what we're going to do, but we're not removing it. And I thought, wow, there really does have to be a much stronger emphasis on education for these architects, because the reality is we've got to make them more fire resistant as far as the materials that are being used and the arrangement, right, that is being used. And then another thing that you had mentioned when you said, we have to worry about the wildfire after. In my mind, I broke it down as before, during, and after. Like, these are key components, even in business, of what we look at. But when I break down the wildfire, it's like, okay, there's an event, and it may not be near your home, it may be miles away, but before is preparing with anything that you can do to have the home prepared with, the vents or the gutter guards, etc. But before, you're going to have embers flying at you, right? So that's going to be a vulnerability. During, you're going to have the flame front, like you had said. And then after, you're going to have the smoldering concern. And it's interesting because Rich Snyder shared that they were on wildland firefighter, I forget how many years ago, but they were doing some cleanup days after, and they saw this smoke coming out from underneath the home, and they kept going out there with water. And as they began to pull things back, they noticed that on the foundation vent of the home that some embers had gone through, and this floor joist was literally smoldering, and they were able to see it, and they turned it off. But when you think about it, these are the types of situations, like you had said, these homes and these properties and these communities can still go down after the flame front has passed, because we don't have this awareness of where the possibility that these embers have intruded and gotten into. So I think it's not just enough to say, okay, everything's fine, the flame front has left, and I have nothing to worry about. We still have to be very conscious and aware of what's going on around us. So just wanted to share those points. I think very powerful from the standpoint of always understanding that we are vulnerable before, during, and after the wildfire is even turned off in our communities. You had mentioned the screening, and I do want to touch on this. Right now, Ralph, there's Cal Davis, right? You're going to be doing a screening there pretty soon in the next few weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, on May 31st at University of California, Davis. Got it.
Okay. And so, and then you were just in Washington too, right? Or are you going to be in Washington?
We have another one coming up in Washington and Seattle at the end of June. We have a week run here in Portland, Oregon. We were just in Colorado. We've been as far as New York and Vermont with the film. In Boston, we did a screening to the insurance industry. So those dates and what remains, they are up on the elementalfilm.com website under screenings. And then if folks, can't make it to one of those screenings, or isn't one in their community, but they want to bring it to their community, they can reach out to us through the website. Or if they just want to watch it on streaming in the comfort of their own home on their big screen TV, and make their own popcorn, then they can watch it on Apple TV. It'll be available on Google Play and all the sort of rental streaming services to begin with.
And when is that going to be available?
June 13th.
Got it.
Yeah.
I love that. I think, having I think for every fire safe council, for everyone that is involved in your community, that you want to be a voice for prevention, you want to be a voice for being able to help your community, this would be a perfect opportunity to actually invite friends, communities, neighbors, family to come and enjoy this film, because it brings such a level of awareness, Ralph, that we keep hearing little fragments and different pieces of what needs to be done, even the things that we offer. You know, some people get overwhelmed with, oh, that's just too much. But the reality is, it really is pretty simple. And if people come together and allow this film to touch them and I say like minister to them, man, I think it's very powerful where people can walk away and say, okay, I am responsible. I'm going to do my part. And as a community gets together and they get this energy to want to do something together, I think that would be absolutely powerful. So I would encourage communities, fire safe councils, Firewise communities, to HOAs to really do something to bring people together, because if your neighbor's home survives, you have a better chance of your home surviving, and the opposite is true too. So let's help each other. Go ahead.
I totally agree, OP. I mean, I think, a lot of times in the post-screening Q&As, I get questions about like, what are the policy changes that happen? I'm like, look, I can talk about that, but I think it's really got to be social change. It's got to be neighbor to neighbor. It's got to be relational. If you're around your house, or you've hired someone to come in and help you do things around your house, and your neighbor sees that, they're going to get probably curious. If they know you, they're going to want to understand it. And they're going to be like, oh, you're doing it. So there's going to be those spark plugs in their community that are doing it and leading, and that's going to motivate other people far more than, a stick, right? It's the carrot, it's the relational, it's the keeping up with your neighbors, it's learning, it's somebody you trust. I think that's so powerful. And in places like Truckee, which is, a lot of second homes and some primary homes, for example, they're apparently on a 3-year rotation where every house is inspected and assessed, and people can just like upload the data. And it's really impressive, so it's working in this neighbor to neighbor with people that they trust, whether it's, a company like Allied Disaster Defense or the fire department being involved in that assessment. And then the neighbor is empowered to prioritize, and who do they hire to help them, and what do they do themselves. That stuff is working. So I agree with you. And we have been contacted by a lot of HOAs, a lot of fire departments, a lot of fire safe councils, a lot of Firewise community groups about, how do I get the film? Can I do screenings? Do you have a kit to go along with it? So we've tried to put a lot of the resources, and we're continuing to build that out with information about all the scientists on there, if you want to nerd out more about what they're teaching you.
Yes.
But I think we did an interview recently with the Landscape Architecture magazine. We're definitely going to try to send the film and get the film into the hands of the landscape architecture schools. One of the persons that's co-presenting with us at UC Davis in the Q&A panel, that's her specialty, is landscape architecture. And we specifically wanted her to participate on the panel with us because of that. Yes. Because, it's going to matter what training is going on for young people these days, as like where the authentic, durable solutions are. They need to hear that, and people need to hear it neighbor to neighbor. That's going to matter more than someone that they don't know maybe reaching them, right? Yeah. So I'm all for what you said. I think that's what we hope. The film is accessible to the general public in that way. And we have heard people email us, I did the things, I got my parents to do the things, I'd like to film so I can show it and get my community to do the things.
Love it.
And I'm like, awesome. That's a win for me. That's why I made the film, for that kind of impact.
Now, so I love that. I think, that's a win for you. That sounds awesome. The from a business standpoint, right, Ralph, I'm always thinking like, man, like how are you monetizing this? Is this, because to me, I'm like, wow, this is a really cool film. Ralph is probably making millions of dollars, man. It's awesome that way. But is that the case? Are things happening that fast, or is it a different story that's going on?
The film was definitely a labor of love, and I work for a nonprofit, and I'm funded by philanthropic sources to do fire safe community work. Trip Jennings, who's the director of the film, has a production company, and he gets paid to do things for PBS or National Geographic or other clients. In the documentary film space, the business side of the movie business is not a moneymaker. OP, unfortunately.
Okay.
The film cost a considerable amount to make, okay? And it brought me a lot of joy to make it, to spend time in the forest doing the wildlife photography or the time-lapse photography. We got funding from National Geographic. We got funding from Patagonia. We got funding from foundations in the Pacific Northwest who believed in the project. We are making a little bit off of the theatrical run, but it's mostly done to have impact and also to generate awareness around the film before it goes to streaming. With streaming, it's anybody's guess. I mean, we are doing a deal with Belgian TV. We're doing a deal with Swiss TV, and they want it for broadcast because they're having fires over there. They've been having fires. They're having more fires. There was 4,000 fires in England last year. Korean TV is interested, Canadian, Australian. So we will try to break even, and that will help us do our next project. Our next project could be a wildfire film. I've actually been asked to help on a film in Colorado, and what's happening in the events in Colorado, focused on two fires, the East Troublesome Fire and the Marshall Fire, and I've agreed to help with that. I'm working on a screenplay. I think we need an animated movie around wildfire because of how much animation influences our beliefs, and those good stories influence our beliefs. So I'm working on that project with Margot Robbins from the UROC, and a writer and an animator. And that's a kind of a moonshot project, right? You have to write the entire screenplay before you go pitch it.
Wow, yeah.
So it's quite an investment. I've really enjoyed it. It just kind of happened, right? We started with short form videos to help folks make sense of particular events in their backyards, and people really responded to it because of the way that we did it, I think, and the hope that it provided them and the understanding that it provided. So I think there's a lot more storytelling that could happen in this space that's not happened. But yeah, it's, we're mostly in this for the impact and the social change, because we can't continue to have communities incinerating. I mean, the American Red Cross is supporting us because they're struggling to keep up with the challenges of community recovery. And many of these communities are 10 to 20% rebuilt, and they're never the same. We need to get ahead of this problem. We can't have insurance companies exiting large parts of the Western US. That's why I'm in it,
Yeah,
and
I love it.
And I'm all for there being businesses that are involved in the solutions, that are involved in an authentic, real way that is doing good things for people and selling them a product that is of great value. I think another win for me is for the film to be part of stimulating the growth in those industries. And people feeling like, because a lot of people are like, I don't have time to do this stuff. I just want to hire somebody I can trust.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also a win, right? But for me, I've been, for 20 plus years, someone working in the nonprofit space for the social good.
Yeah, that's awesome, Ralph. Look, if we have donors or philanthropists that are listening, how could they contact you if they do want to say, hey, look, my money's on Ralph on the abilities to create something like this and for future productions? How can they contact you?
Yeah, they can just reach out directly through elementalfilm.com website and it will get to me, or they can reach me directly. You have my contact, but it's like ralph@greenoregon.org is my primary email, which folks are welcome just to reach out to me that way. And, I am in the philanthropic space. I do advise a number of folks trying to have impact on the wildfire solutions, whether it's, scaling up prescribed fire and cultural burning, or wildfire prepared homes, or forest restoration. So that's a space that I've been in for many years. And, I'd be happy to talk to people about any of their interests around, things that they want to accomplish, whether it's in their community or their state or in the West. I expect I'll be doing it for another 5-10 years at least.
Yes. No, I think there's such a big need. And, when you talk about Colorado and how they had over 36 red flag warnings this last year, that's amazing, because when I think about winds, I think about California, Santa Ana winds. This is what we're accustomed to. But, the reality is it's happening in multiple states, these types of events where the red flag warning, where you've got so much heat, you've got wind coming up. There's so many vulnerabilities now with just a cigarette or a chain that's dragging that causes a spark. I mean, all these things that could happen. It's for us, at least for me in California, when the winds start kicking in, man, I'm on red alert myself, just kind of looking around going, man, we have to be mindful and be aware that these wind events, although they may feel good and they cool you, the reality is it's creating a whole nother level of risk and vulnerability. So for all of us to really be on alert, I think it's critical. And I wasn't even thinking about other states, but to your point, absolutely, there's so many more states are being affected. Ralph, would you say that it's the Western United States that's being impacted the most? Have you done any of that research at all?
Well, currently, yes. I mean, California is, in terms of home total losses, I mean, the 2017 and 2018 wildfire season wiped out 26 years of premium profits for the insurance industry, 2x. California is 74% of the nation's losses in wildfire currently. Colorado's number 2 and Oregon's number 3. However, we did just have some fires in New York and New Jersey, in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. We have been seeing some predictions with the amplified El Nino that is expected this summer, that there will be a significant dry out in places like Michigan and the upper parts of Michigan and in Wisconsin and maybe in some of the Dakotas, which, if there's ignition and there's a wind event, we will see fire activity there. So I think that it's right on to think about these fire events much more as wind events. I remember a discussion I had with a scientist about 8 years ago, and I've been remembering it more recently because I asked him. He was an insect expert, and bug kill has contributed to a lot of tree mortality in Colorado and other places. As temperatures rise, bugs can continue to remain active over winter and they're not freezing, and so then you have a lot of bug kill. And I said to him, Dr. Waring, what do you expect will alter our forest the most? Will it be, wildfire or insects or something else? And he said, well, actually, it's going to be wind. And he said, look at the Southeast United States with increased hurricane activity. And, that's what you're going to see. And you're going to see fires driven by wind. And I would think of them more as wind events. And, so you see the fire triangle. And what I say now in Q&A is like, look, the fire triangle is no longer equilateral in these extreme events. It's the wind that's dominating. It's not the fuels. We're focused on the fuels because that's the one thing we think we can affect over space and time. And I say think because I still don't believe really over space and time, except locally around the home or around the community, that we can, maintain over space and time. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. So, we can do a patch of forest, but can we do an entire landscape? And what are we doing? That kind of thing. That's a bunch of questions we can spend time on. But I think of fire events and the extreme events much more as wind events. So I appreciate you highlighting that. And I think that we're going to see see other parts of the United States that aren't the 11 Western states going to experience some fire events. Congressman Neguse introduced me in the film in Colorado. He's in the Bipartisan Wildfire Caucus, very thoughtful, very beloved in Colorado, great public speaker, also a University of Colorado grad like me. Nice. And he got up and he said, you know, for the longest time, we've thought about these events as forest fires. And then the Marshall Fire happened. It's not even on the risk maps as a place that we expect to burn. He said, and I expect we're going to see similar events on the Front Range in the future. And the question is, are we going to get ahead of them? And then he introduced the film. So he was totally on point with that. I mean, they're seeing, you know, regularly 50, 60, 70, 80 plus mile-an-hour winds on the Front Range. Sometimes they get a couple days warning, sometimes they get a day warning, and sometimes these wind events manifest with 5-6 hours of warning. So they're living it in Colorado, and it's a similar thing that, you know, that produced the Kincaid fire, that produced the, you know, the Carr fire, that produced the Woolsey fire, that produced these fires. And it's important for folks to know that the primary thing that they can do is prepare their homes and prepare themselves, and that it does work. Boom.
Love that. I love that. Ralph, and thank you so much for spending this quality time with me. I know our listeners are getting a lot of value, and they're going to be looking forward to, if they haven't already, seen the film, and they're going to get a chance on June 13th to be able to stream for themselves and their communities. Is there anything that you would like to leave with the listeners before we close this up?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear from folks if they watch the film. Send me your hot take or your incendiary remarks, and also just like, did it motivate you to do things? Yes. Did you share it with others? You know, we love to hear that. We've gotten hundreds and hundreds of inquiries for the film and feedback for the film. And if you can, you know, go on to Rotten Tomatoes and give it a thumbs up and give your review of the film. Do those kinds of things to amplify it and get more people to watch it. That's my request for folks. You know, I tell my son, he's like, "What was your day like today?" I ask people to watch the movie. That's what I do right now. And you know, try to keep it modest. I mean, I have some interesting conversations usually every day, and I learn things too. But yeah, watch the movie. Let me know what you think. Tell other people to watch the movie. And if you ended up doing things because of watching the movie, we'd love to hear about it.
That's awesome. And for you listeners, you know, when you do a review, I mean, you know, some people don't like to do reviews. We're going to do our part, and we're going to do that, Ralph, because my belief is the more people that we're able to give their opinion, do a review, is going to allow this type of skill set, this type of talent, this type of body of work to really perpetuate itself, where more people pay attention, more investors, more philanthropists, more donors get involved and say, you know what, there's really something good going on here. And whatever we can do with our part, if we really enjoy the film and what's being taught, the scientific methods behind it, let's do our part, as simple as it is, to leave a review and really promote what's going on here. And you know, Ralph, I appreciate your time, brother. You and I have spoken for hours in the past, and I love catching up with you. The next time you're in California, I do want you to stop by and say hi, and maybe we could do a podcast in person. That'd be awesome.
All right. Thanks, OP, for having me. And again, thanks for the work that you and your team do. And, you know, go also find a burn forest it's like a young person, full of life and potential. With usually a lot of noise and activity in them. Go check that out. Don't believe what the media says that they're necessarily destroyed. I think that also will feel good to folks, because we need to know what's happening in the world around us. Yes, and there's nothing better than getting outside and enjoying those spaces that we have in California and Oregon and Washington as well. Even if they've been touched by fire, they may not seem like it at first, but there's quite a bit in there as well. So thanks for having me, OP, and until next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Ralph.
That's all for this episode of All Things Wildfire. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our show and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things wildfire. And as always, thanks for listening.